Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
I was never the person to think that, my circumstances could dictate my outcomes.
Is there a soccer story on your wish list?
It would be unbelievable if one day I could write about that team, interview a couple players.
Stories told by a personally connected raconteur, someone with a deep connection to the subject matter or the people at the center of any given story, are often the most compelling. A journalist's capacity to relate can infuse pieces with an authenticity grounded in understanding nuances about convention and tradition and terms and language, for example, that simultaneously hit as specific and universal. That lends itself to stories that resonate through their details as much as their themes, that we remember for the way they make us think and feel. There's a young new journalist in town who's written a story that does all that, and his feature on St. Louis City SC's youngest hometown and homegrown talent, Miguel Perez, is now live on our website. I also have the distinct pleasure today of sitting across from that young journalist, Julian Trejo, freshman at Washington University, seasoned soccer player and inaugural fellow for the River City Journalism Fund. Julian, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's talk first about the story you've written about Miguel Perez. Was a feature on Miguel something that you wanted and pursued? Tell us how that came about.
Yeah, so once the season started and Miguel played against Austin, I heard that he was 17, and a couple of days before he had signed his first contract, and, it got me thinking, he's young, getting his first start in his professional career. I'm young, I'm getting my start in my journalism career. Maybe there's a connection there. I also knew that, with my history playing soccer, maybe I could connect to him on a personal level. He comes from a Hispanic background. I'm Hispanic, so I thought, I could connect to him on a different level that maybe other journalists couldn't. Mm-hmm. And I thought that, it'd be a valuable tool to use.
And do you know whether there were other sports journalists in town who were wanting to get this story and maybe didn't get it?
Yeah, so interesting story is I tried to talk to Miguel after the Austin game and definitely after the Charlotte game at home.
And the Austin game was the first one, right?
Yep, the Austin game was the first one. Charlotte, the first game at home. And so after the Charlotte game on Tuesday, I had an interview with Miguel. And, that weekend he started his first game against Portland. But it was a busy week at school. I'm a student at WashU, so I didn't have a chance to write my story yet. And that weekend, I think Benjamin Hockman, at the Post-Dispatch wrote a story about him. And I tried to get more access to him. And the media guy actually told me that, that was kind of not possible because everybody in St. Louis wanted to talk to Miguel Perez after that.
So how did it then happen?
Yeah, so I talked to Miguel on that Tuesday before the Portland game. I sat on the story for a bit. Like I said, I focused on school for a couple weeks. And then my editor, he reached out to me and said, hey, you should talk to his parents. I think you could get some valuable information from his parents. Because at that point, all I had was my interview with Miguel and also with head coach Bradley Carnell. And, we reached out, the conventional way. We reached out to the team and said, hey, would it be possible for us to, speak to Miguel's parents? And, same thing. He's really busy. A lot of people are getting these requests. And so actually last week, I reached out to Miguel's older brother, Louis, on Instagram, just on a whim. I needed a way to get into contact with his parents. Technically, it would have been wrong to reach out to Miguel directly. So I, went around it a little bit, reached out to his older brother, messaged him on Instagram like, hey, I'm a new journalist. I interviewed your brother a couple weeks ago. I need to, I'm wondering if I could talk to your parents. Could you connect me? And, about an hour later, Louis, the man, he responded and he gave me his dad's phone number. So that was really helpful.
That's great. Now, your story, it starts with Miguel's family, and I can kind of see why based on how you ended up getting sort of to a fuller feature. But was there another reason you decided to begin with the family?
Yeah, so through my conversation with Luis and Jackie, I just realized, they're normal people. They're humble, they're hardworking, and they provided me so many great little stories. Like, I'm disappointed that I couldn't include more. They gave me so many personal, intimate details from Miguel's life and gave me a lot of great, memories that they have of him as a child. And I could just tell these are two people that, they put their kids before everything. Family is the most important thing to them in their lives. And, I kind of wanted that to be the main theme of the article. Like, yeah, it was a story about Miguel and, like, his rise, but it's also a story about his family and how they helped get him there.
And Luis and Jackie are Miguel's parents. Tell us a little bit more about his parents.
Yeah, so Luis actually, like I said, I got Luis's number, Miguel's dad, from Luis. And, Luis, I sent him a text, hey, I'm Julian. I explained to him the whole rundown. And right away, like 10 minutes later, he responded, hola, Julian, like, ¿cómo estás? And, he, just from speaking to him, I could tell, this is a guy that has never even seen my face before. I've never met him.
Yeah.
And he was already treating me like, we're lifelong friends or something. And he was super open and super helpful with everything and made me feel super comfortable more than anything. Throughout our conversation with him and his wife, he always kept asking me, like, oh, like, you can stop me anytime you want if I'm rambling too much, or, at certain points in the conversation, I would input, give my opinion or say, hey, that reminds me of this in my life or that in my life, because, I played soccer as well and I played club soccer. So I can relate to some of the stories they were telling me about Miguel, and, they were really, really understanding of that and super, super nice.
So this playing the soccer part, that is no small part in your personal background and what you're doing now with the writing. You started when you were 7. Played competitively as a starting goalkeeper for several state championship teams in your home state of Arkansas. How did that personal experience as a soccer player inform the way you wrote the story, including, some of the things that you've already mentioned about the interviewing components?
Yeah, so, using my experience of, playing soccer, for example, that moment whenever, Luis is talking about Miguel getting demoted, basically, when he was at St. Louis Scott Gallagher, I can relate to the adversity and how that feels, when you kind of have a coach kind of tell you that you're not good enough, or maybe, you're not giving me what I need from you right now. And I understand how that moment feels. And I could also understand the fire that you feel, like, no, I want to prove you wrong. Like, I'm going to redeem myself. And so asking Luis those questions about, Miguel's transition from St. Louis Scott Gallagher to JB Marine. And, I couldn't include more details about it, but he was telling me how it was making that transition was almost the best thing he could have done for himself, because he got the opportunity to play with old friends and just play for fun, play for free, play carelessly, not worried about the pressure, like the politics of being on a team or the social stigma, just playing for fun. And obviously, the rest is history.
There's a lot of intensity there. Now, for those who are not familiar with soccer, sort of whether it is the sport overall or those clubs that you talked about here, can you explain briefly what St. Louis Scott Gallagher is, as well as JB Marine?
Yeah, so St. Louis Scott Gallagher is one of the premier academy clubs in St. Louis, and I would bet to say in Missouri as a state. And it's a high level. They have multiple academy teams for different age groups, and the way it works, basically, from my understanding with my conversation with Miguel's parents, is that it's kind of like a social status to be on the highest level team, and there's a lot of pressure to be on that team. And so actually, like I said, these little details I just couldn't include in the story.
Yeah.
But whenever they demoted Miguel and said, no, you're going to be on the bench, they were going to leave him on the bench on the highest level team. But Miguel and his parents decided, no, I want to be playing week in, week out. And so they voluntarily demoted themselves to the B team to get more action. But the club hierarchy was pretty offended by that you wouldn't take the opportunity to be on the best team, to be on the bench. Like, you'd rather play on the worst team. And the club could understand that decision.
Okay.
And then eventually, they moved on to JB Marine.
So that gets to a lot of what you were saying, political and social components to playing sports at the club level. And a lot of what you're saying to me, I played sports in the past. I would rather play than sit on the bench of the best team, because that's what you're there to do, right?
Of course. And at that age, at 14, 15, the most important thing you can do is play. no matter what level it is, no matter how often, you have games week in, week out, like you want to be starting. You don't want to be wasting away on the bench. There's no point in being on a soccer team if you're just going to practice, because practicing and training is just not the same as playing a game. You need that experience of playing in a game.
Right. And so you and Miguel are very close in age, right? He is 17, you are...
I'm 18, yes.
18, okay. And you are both, latter generation Americans. That is, that you were both born in the U.S. with either parents or grandparents who came to the States from Mexico. How much of that commonality, you've talked about that in the interaction that you had with Miguel's older brother and with his parents, but was there something about that helped you kind of get more from Miguel than he might have been comfortable doing with other sports writers in town?
Yeah, so I think a big part of that, more than anything, was my age and then just my understanding about the sport, given my experience playing. So, for example, throughout our conversation, I asked some questions like, what's your pregame ritual? Who's your favorite rapper to listen to before a game? And he was telling me his favorite rappers, his favorite music. Lil Baby.
Oh, okay.
Then we started talking about, favorite foods, places to eat, what he likes to do in his free time. And then just, that understanding that I get what it's like to play soccer. I get what it's like to play on a team. So asking him questions that were similar and revolved around that, made him more comfortable and open up a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Now, this story is up on our website, stlpublicradio.org, so be sure to check it out. When we're talking about this story, there's the journey that you've been through to write it, how you got access in a way. Is there someone or a group of folks that you really want to read this story? And if so, why?
Yeah, more than anything, I really, really would like, Luis and Jackie and the whole Perez family to read this story. This story is about them. And, I really hope they feel that I did them justice. This was probably my favorite article that I've written so far.
So far.
And honestly, it's a different level. When I'm writing about a game, I'm not necessarily writing about a person. I'm writing about a team. I'm writing about tactics, about what's going on. I'm explaining something. But when you write about people, you want to make sure you write about them accurately and you really, really, get their essence. I want them to feel like they can read that story and say, yeah, that's exactly how it happened, or that's exactly how I felt. And, I want them to be happy with it. Mm-hmm.
And having read that story, Miguel Perez certainly comes across as more than merely a 17-year-old Pattonville High School student and the first, homegrown talent for the team. Like the fuller humanity and his experience really comes out. We need to take a brief time out here, but stay close. When we come back, we'll learn more about Julian Trejo's own story on and off the soccer field. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. Welcome back. I'm Elaine Cha. I'm talking today with Julian Trejo, the Washington University freshman and young writer whose most recent poignant feature, now live on stlpr.org, centers on St. Louis City SC's youngest hometown and homegrown player, Miguel Perez. Now, before the break, we were talking about that piece and how it came to be, Julian. And we had also touched upon what had happened, that journey from Scott Gallagher to J.B. Marine. What happened after that?
What after J.B. Marine?
After he got to J.B. Marine, what happened that sort of led to his becoming part of, the MLS team here in
Yeah,
St. Louis?
So he played with J.B. Marine in the fall of 2021, had a great year with all his friends, and then his coach from the J.B. Marine was like, hey, would you guys like to participate in the Missouri ODP program in early 2022 in a couple months?
And ODP is the
Olympic Development Program. Mm-hmm. It's basically, it's not incredibly high level. The most high level players in the state won't play ODP because it's kind of a waste of their time.
Okay.
But it is a good way for, those intermediate level players to get some national and regional recognition.
Got it. Okay.
So, his coach conveyed that, it's not a super high level, but it's a way to get some touches in on the ball during the winter months and, during the off season. So Miguel agreed. Him and his parents went out to Boonville, Missouri, and that's where the team would have training sessions because most of the team players on the ODP team were either from St. Louis or Kansas City. And Boonville is kind of like that middle point where the drive would be equal on both sides. And, they had training sessions there. And just on a whim, sporting director Lutz Pfannenstiel happened to be there, and, there's also this story that he was planning on leaving, I think, earlier in the day or either the night before. And just by chance, he decided to just stay, just to see if maybe somebody would be on that field. And, Miguel Perez happened to be on the field that day.
So that timing plus talent coming together. Now, you have yourself an incredibly compelling story. As we had said before the break, it's both on and off the soccer field. Julian, tell us about your earliest memories of playing soccer and how that became part of your life.
Yeah, so I started playing soccer at 7. My dad wasn't really involved in my life too much when I was younger. And my grandfather, may he rest in peace, he got me started in soccer. He knew that I needed something as an outlet to, kind of express myself and kind of get away from it all. And so he got me involved in soccer. And actually at the time, I actually didn't speak Spanish yet. I hadn't learned Spanish.
Okay.
And I'm from a town in Arkansas called Springdale, Northwest Arkansas. And it's a predominantly Hispanic population there. And so I played in the local church leagues in Springdale. And so most of the coaches and most of the players, spoke in Spanish.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned, there was no other way. If I didn't know Spanish and I wasn't going to play, I wasn't going to be able to communicate with my teammates, with my coaches.
Yeah.
And so just from being involved in that community, going to practices, going to games, I learned Spanish and I really had the time of my life.
And that actually reflects, I think, the experience a lot of latter generation Americans who come from immigrant families. It's through a sport or church that they actually learn their ancestral language. That was true for me too. Now, I realized that your personal story, there was quite a bit of adversity there. Soccer is something that you did more than just as kind of a hobby, right? Playing on competitive teams, but you also were an excellent student. So how did you manage to keep playing through some of those adversities and keep up your grades at school?
Because I've always been one of those people that, I've used my adversity and my circumstances and maybe the difficulties in my life as motivation. I was never the person to think that, my circumstances could dictate my outcomes. I always felt that soccer and school were the only two things in life that I could control. In a world of uncertainty, instability, just darkness at times, soccer and school were the only things that I 100%, if I took accountability for it, if I worked hard, were the only things that I could control. And I knew even from a young age that, if I wanted to make something of myself, have a better life for my future, then school was the way to do that. And soccer was more so a means of expressing myself and having fun and having a little bit of an escape from it all.
Now, your path to St. Louis, I'm going to draw a parallel between some part of Miguel's story and yours. With Scott Gallagher, someone told him, I don't think that you have what it takes. Then he went somewhere else to JB Marine, and then that timing and talent thing coming together. And in your case, it was somebody who saw something in you that led to your coming to St. Louis. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in high school, I had a teacher. Her name was Miss Bonilla. She was my debate teacher, actually. And it was at that point, because at that point in high school, I was a senior in high school. My goal was always to go to the University of Arkansas. It was the local school. I never really had any dreams of going out of state for college. Wanted to stay close to family. And, she saw something in me. She said, Julian, you should apply to this program called QuestBridge. And she mentioned that QuestBridge is an organization that matches high-achieving, low-income students with some of the top universities across the country. And I told her no. I don't want to leave home for college. The closest school is here in St. Louis, WashU, 5 hours away.
Oh.
And I don't want to leave home. Like, I just want to stay here. And she said, Julian, like, I really think this could change your life. Like, I really think you could become a finalist for it. And at that point also, I knew I was a good student. I got good grades. I was in AP classes, taking college courses. But I always thought that I was a good student in my little bubble of Arkansas. But on a national stage, I didn't think I could compete with, some of the top students in private schools, private high schools across the country. And, she pushed me, and I did. I became a finalist. And then more than anything, God played a huge role in me getting here. Just a quick little story. You can apply to as many schools as you want for regular decision through QuestBridge. So through QuestBridge regular decision, I applied to 17 schools.
Wow, okay.
And the mass before decision week, when all the college decisions come out, I was really scared. Honest, I was just terrified. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was so uncertain about my future. And I remember I was in the pew and I was praying, and I remember I asked God, I was like, God, I really don't want to leave home. I want to stay here with all my heart. I don't want to go anywhere. So if 2 or more of these colleges accept me, I'm staying here in Arkansas, because there's no way I could choose between 2 or more schools on where my future is going to be. Like, I'm going to make the wrong decision. I don't trust myself. If none of the schools accept me, amazing, awesome. Thank you so much. I'll just stay here. I'll be happy. That's like the best thing you could do for me. But if there's one place that you really need me to go, it's part of your plan, and you need me to be in this place, you need to make it obvious. So decision week starts, and one by one, out of every single one of those schools that I applied to, 16 rejected me. Straight out rejected. No deferrals, nothing. Straight up rejected. And the only one that accepted me was WashU. And so my answer didn't get any clearer than that.
And here you are now.
And here I am.
We're speaking with Julian Trejo, who is a Washington University freshman and a young writer who has personal experience with soccer, and he's using that here. Now, you are on a full ride scholarship at Washington University. It's not an athletic scholarship, but soccer is clearly still very much a part of your life now and what you're writing about. As soon as you learned that you were going to be coming here, you got that sign. Did you then start strategizing about how you could make soccer part of your life here as a student?
No, I never saw that possibility. Like I said, this is another instance where God came in my life once again. So I'm sitting in my college writing class. I have a great relationship with my professor, Mr. King. And one day he says to me, hey, you're good at writing. We had this one assignment where we interviewed our classmates. I also interviewed other people outside of class for my research essay. And he said, hey, you're a pretty strong writer and you're good at interviewing people. Have you ever thought about being a journalist before? And I said, no, I never have. Why? He's like, well, I have this friend who works at this foundation, the River City Journalism Fund. And, they help writers like you get their start in journalism if you're interested. And I said, I should just talk to him. If I don't really like the idea, I could always just say no.
Yeah.
So I talked to, Richard Weiss, and I liked the proposal. And the only catch is that whatever I write about has to be St. Louis based. And I said, okay, I don't know anything about St. Louis. I don't know what I could write about. And then one day it hit me, the soccer team.
Yeah.
So I asked him, hey, the only thing I do know about is soccer. And there's a soccer team in St. Louis. I feel like that's St. Louis related. Can I write about that? And he said, yeah. And so I wrote my first story was about soccer supporter groups. I wrote about the Luligans, about Fleur de Noise, and I wrote about No Nap City, and did really well. And then I got here.
Yeah. And Mr. King that you were talking about is Chris King,
Yep.
the former editor of the St. Louis American. You've been very clear that you want to focus on strategy in your soccer journalism work here. Why does strategy interest you so much, especially in this local context?
Well, because I realize and I understand that as, a small journalist, independent journalist, you could say, I don't have the resources of, a big media outlet. I don't have other people working with me to write stories or bounce off ideas or help me with this and that. It's just me. And I also realized because of that, I'm not going to be able to write a story as fast as the Post-Dispatch can. You know, I'm just always going to come last. So I thought, you know, what differentiates me from them? I played soccer. If you've ever noticed, I'm one of the only journalists of color that covers the team. And I'm also by far the youngest one that covers the team. And I'm pretty sure one of the only ones that has actual soccer experience. And so just a culmination of those things, I decided to bring it together and say, you know what, I understand the game of soccer. I think it would be appealing to the St. Louis community if I could write about the strategy and the tactics of a game and, you know, teach them about it. So that, you know, they could, you know, hopefully the idea is you could read my articles, learn a couple things, and maybe talk to your friends about it and say, hey, you know, I learned this about the team, or I know this, I know that. And you become more informed and become more engaged and more excited about the team.
The last question here. Is there a soccer story on your wish list? And are you open to story ideas from folks who want your take on it?
Oh, soccer story on my wish list. Yeah, actually, me and my family were big fans of this team in Mexico called Chivas. It would be unbelievable if one day I could write about that team, interview a couple players. That would be amazing. And, you know, if somebody would like my opinion about something in soccer, I mean, I would be okay to give it, but I'm also one of those people that, you know, I don't really think I'm too special. I'm not really anybody that important, so I don't really know why people would ask me, but if they did, I'll give them an answer.
And how can they hit you up on social media?
On Instagram, it's Julian Trejo 479, and then on TikTok, it's Julian Trejo _ I also make TikTok vlogs, so if you're interested in seeing a day in my life, you know, what it's like to be a student and a journalist, you know, do your homework, take exams, and then also go write about the soccer team, you can check that out on my social media.
We'll do that. Julian Trejo is Washington University freshman and the inaugural fellow of the River City Journalism Fund. His work has appeared in the St. Louis American, the Riverfront Times, and of course on St. Louis Public Radio. His story that's live now on our website is how Miguel Perez became a hometown soccer hero and made history at St. Louis SC.
Today's episode was produced by Alex Hoyer.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our production intern is Avery Rogers.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Our podcast proudly supports St. Louis artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.